Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your interest in our webinar. My name is Akemi Ishikawa, industrial development expert, working for several women economic empowerment projects at UNIDO headquarters in Vienna. I am pleased to launch the UNIDO webinar on gender mainstreaming for applicants of UNIDO's Industrial Cooperation Program in the Global South through technology transfer from Japan, so-called GS program. And for those who are interested in UNIDO's gender mainstreaming in technical cooperation. Today's presentation materials and recordings will be available on the UNIDO ITPO Tokyo website in due course. If you have any questions, please enter them using the webinar's Q&A feature in English. Please be sure to include your affiliation and your name with your questions. We will not read out the name of the company or name the person asking the question when answering, but we will not answer anonymous questions. In addition, I would be pleased if you bear in mind that the purpose of today's webinar is to brief UNIDO's gender mainstreaming initiatives. Thus, we will not answer any questions regarding the second call for proposals of the GS program, which is currently open. If you have any questions regarding the second call for proposals, please consult e-procurement, an online procurement system operated by the Procurement Service Unit at UNIDO headquarters. Now, let me invite our presenter, Ms. Azusa Hitotsuyanagi, UNIDO Gender Mainstreaming Expert. Azusa-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kemi-san, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Azusa Hitotsuyanagi. I'm the gender mainstreaming expert of UNIDO. And today we'll talk about gender mainstreaming and what it means for the Industrial Cooperation Program in the Global South through technology transfer from Japan, in short, the Global South project. So let us get started. Can you move to the next slide, please? So today there's a couple of things that we would like to cover. And first we'll talk about the basic concepts on gender mainstreaming, and gender equality. Then we will move on to, well, what is the situation in today's world when it comes to gender and gender equality? Then we will cover about different UN and other global frameworks on gender mainstreaming, and also touch upon the national framework in the case of Japan. And then we'll move on to UNIDO's commitment on gender mainstreaming. And finally, we'll talk about how we would like you to incorporate gender mainstreaming, gender perspectives into your proposal of the Global South project. And we will focus on the gender marker and our requirements. And we'll also give you guidance or hints on what you can do. And there'll be examples of gender mainstreaming actions, followed by a Q&A session. So let's get started. Please, next slide. Thank you. So let's talk about gender mainstreaming, and gender equality. So what is gender? Gender is a marker of identity. It is a socially and culturally defined, contextualized ideas and expectation of what is to be male or female. And this can be a way of expression, this can be a way of behavior, and the roles and responsibilities that each female and male are somehow expected to play in the society. And because it is a socially and culturally constructed idea, gender is very dynamic, and also it depends on where you are. Gender can be very different depending on the country you live in, or the religious group that you belong to. It could also depend on your ethnic group. It can also depend on between generations as well. So that is why gender is very dynamic and also very diverse. And so what is gender mainstreaming then? Well, simply put, gender mainstreaming is a tool. And it is a tool to see, well, ensure and that needs and interests of women, men, girls, and boys are included in organizations, systems, strategies, programming, design, and implementation. And it is very important because we would like to ensure that women and men equally benefit from any kind of interventions that you're planning, and also that we don't perpetuate any kind of gender inequality that may exist in the country of operation, and that we don't by unconsciously enforce any kind of bias that may exist. And henceforth, the main goal of gender mainstreaming is gender equality. And then, so what is gender equality? Gender equality is simply put the state of all individuals, women, men, boys, and girls are being equally treated, equally valued, and that they all have the rights and opportunities and also have access to any kinds of resources. Please move on to the next slide. Thank you. So when we talk about gender in today's world, how do each country fare in this in global scale? The World Economic Forum has been publishing a data set called the gender parity. And what this gender parity is a measurement of gender equality, the extent of gender equality. And I believe that this global gender gap report, which the World Economic Forum compiles annually, has been also been brought up in the mass media in Japan as well. And what it does is that it ranks countries by the scores in gender parity, and how they define gender parity is how equal countries are for women and men in terms of economy, politics, health, and education. And by far, unfortunately, none of the countries have actually achieved gender equality. However, Iceland is by far the number one, followed by all the rest of the countries, which in total is 146 countries that are included in this report. And what you can see in this whole data set is that whilst it tends to be that the economically advanced countries have higher scores in gender equality, or gender parity in this sense. However, there are also countries that are pretty in the top ranks that are not necessarily as advanced when it comes to economic development. And also, there are other countries that are economically advanced and matured. However, when it comes to gender parity, that they're lagging behind. And such example is Japan. Whilst the country has improved in the recent years, it still is ranked at 118th position out of 146 countries, though there's still a lot of room for improvement as well. So please, on the next slide, please. Thank you. So there's many global frameworks in regards to gender equality, and one of which is the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I suppose that all of you have also heard about SDGs. And goal number 5 in particular focuses on gender equality, and the statement reads, "Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls." What's important to understand about this SDG is that this gender equality, set as goal number 5, is in fact is very much related with many other goals, including UN SDG goal number 8 and 9, which focuses on decent work, and also industrial innovative and sustainable development. And if you look into the targets that are set for each and individual goals, you can see how it is related. So, for example, if you look at target 5.5, it talks about ensure full participation, leadership, and decision making. And then also if you look at target 8.5, it talks about full employment and decent work with equal pay. And then again, target 9.2, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization. So what it means is that for inclusive and sustainable industrial development, gender equality is not a standalone goal, but it's actually a very much integrated goal, and it needs to be addressed when we are trying to pursue such sustainable industrial development. And so let's move on to the next slide to also go through other global and national frameworks. So there are other examples of global frameworks. So for example, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is considered as Women's Bill of Rights. Second is ILO's Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, which talks about different labor conventions, labor rights, and also includes equal rights for women and men. And then the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action was a very much a groundbreaking agreement where global actors came together to very much agree that gender mainstreaming is a global strategy. And in the following ECOSOC, they also defined what gender mainstreaming is. And and then there's also the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And what this talks about is how much the private sector can play a big role in protecting human rights, and that includes also women's rights and men's rights as well. And then finally, the Women, Peace and Security, which was adopted in 2019 by the UN Security Council resolution, talks about women's rights and girls and equal rights, especially in countries that are in conflict and also in transition phase of post-conflict. So this would be very interesting for you if you decide to design a demonstration, a business model in such context, in such very sensitive context. And of course, there's all the other frameworks that are also more or less relevant as well. But let's move on to the global actors and networks. So for example, there's the UN Women, which is also one of the UN specialized agencies, and also the World Economic Forum, as I have introduced before, which compiles a lot of interesting reports that I highly recommend you to also go through. And there's also this 30% Plus Club, which is an interesting private sector-led campaign on gender equality and women's empowerment. And if we focus a bit on the national framework, in case of Japan, Japanese government has been introducing many policies and actions and targets, including, let's say, more than 90% of the executive board of management to be filled with women by 2025 for companies listed in Japanese prime market, and more than 30% by 2030. And in addition to these targets, they also set forth different kind of actions. For example, allocating funding for startup businesses that are female-owned. There are also networks, establishing network with academic institutions in order to foster the next generation of female leaders in STEM field. And also there are other other initiatives to tackle gender pay gap. And let's move on to the next slide to talk about what kind of private sector engagement has been taking place in Japan. So the Japanese government and the ministries have been awarding companies that are considered as the front runners of gender equality and empowerment of women within their organization in order to set within their organization valuable inputs when it comes to gender mainstreaming efforts. And they have a very good report about, well, how do these companies that are the front runners fare with other companies who are yet to implement gender equality and empowerment of women related initiative to the extent that these companies are doing. And while this is a descriptive analysis, you can see that there is some level of association between these companies that invest a lot on diversity and women's empowerment with profitability of the company. So what this shows is that investing in women and gender equality has a huge benefit for the private sector. And what I also want to highlight is that the private sector has a huge room for contribution, and it is a very important player when it comes to promoting gender equality empowerment of women. And tackling gender equality empowerment of women is very much a part of many companies' innovative and sustainable growth. And when I was going through the list of companies and their actions that they have been doing, you can say that these companies take on three different kinds of approaches, or you can also call it a multi-pronged approach, where we can categorize it by participation, representation, and engagement. And altogether shows a lot of big commitment on gender equality and empowerment of women. So when it comes to participation, companies focus on first recruiting women, recruiting women and retaining women and in the workforce. And when it comes to representation, setting quotas in management boards and ensure that women are in decision-making platforms. And when it comes to engagement, a lot of these companies are investing a lot in order to encourage that their male employees also get involved in childcare and elderly care, and hence they have a strong policies in order to ensure this kind of engagement. So let's look at the next slide to see more detailed actions. So as I said, so these companies that are very much highly ranked and publicized by the Japanese government, they exemplify a very strong commitment. And how they do is that they usually have a very comprehensive CSR report. And of course, some of these companies, or most of these companies, have a requirement to publish these data, but nevertheless, they do a detailed work in order to show their progress in the recent years. And that shows a lot of strong commitment and also transparency. And what they also have is a clear corporate strategy on diversity and tackling gender discrimination, and also how they link those with the profitability of the organization. And as mentioned before, they tend to invest in multiple actions, which can be categorized in participation, representation, engagement. And for example, as for participation, they work with academic institutions, invite female researchers to join their companies in terms of recruiting campaigns, or that they do internal training for recruiters on unconscious biases. And when it comes to representation, as I've mentioned before, they sometimes set gender quotas for leadership and executive positions. They also provide soft skills and hard skills training in order to enhance the self-efficacy of female leaders, and also provide and also allocate and also set up a strategic capacity building initiatives in order to have a pool of future female leaders in the pipeline. And of course, they sometimes or they often case have a transparent appraisal and compensation systems in place. And when it comes to engagement, they offer a diverse set of comprehensive childcare, elderly care leave, awareness raising on men's engagement on childcare and elderly care, and so forth. So these are the kind of example that these Japanese companies are doing, not only within the country, but also globally as well. So let's move on to the next slide. And so now that we understand how private sectors are such a crucial place, such a crucial role in gender mainstreaming, gender equality, and women's empowerment, and how it is such an integral part globally in terms of inclusive, sustainable industrial development. Let's talk about UNIDO and gender mainstreaming. So UNIDO is very much committed to promoting gender equality and ensuring that women and men can equally lead, participate, and benefit from industrial development measures. And UNIDO ensures that also different needs and situations of women and men are reflected in the project design and all stages of the project cycle. What that means is that project stages and project cycle is that gender is considered starting from the project design, formulation, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And UNIDO has a very good guideline called the UNIDO Guide to Gender Analysis and Gender Mainstreaming the Project Cycle. And we strongly encourage you to take a look at this guideline because it provides a lot of good examples on how to incorporate gender perspectives into your application. So let's move on to the next slide. And as part of the application, you'll find that there is an appendix on gender marker. And gender marker is what you need to use as a tool to assess to what extent the project, the newly designed project, is expected to contribute to gender equality. And it is a precondition for approval for implementation. And UNIDO requires that all projects and programs are henceforth assessed. And if you look at this appendix and you'll start filling out, you realize that it is a very good exercise for self-assessment as well. So before submitting your documents, you'll have these set of criteria. You can read through this sheet, read through what each gender marker score means, definitions, and the requirements to see how to and to what extent your project is expected to contribute to gender equality and what needs to be done in order to mark a higher score. And as you can see that there is a gender marker score ranging from score 0 to 2B. And I'll give you a definition of what each individually means. So score 0 is when there's no expected contribution to gender equality. And score 1 means limited expected contribution to gender equality. 2A is significant expected contribution to gender equality. And finally, 2B is gender equality and empowerment of women is set as a main focus of the project. And ideally, UNIDO would like that all projects and programs score gender marker 2A and 2B, and they'll be considered as desired good practices. But at the same time, we also encourage that gender marker. We also, at the same time, ask that the projects that score gender marker 0 to revise their projects and content in order to improve their design to achieve score number 1. To score 1 before implementation. And this can be said for any kind of UNIDO projects, but we also apply this also for this GS project as well. We would like to see receive proposals that have that have a minimum score of marker 1, and for those who score 0, we highly encourage and we would also provide support. So let's look at the requirements that are to be met for these gender marker score. Let's move on to the next slide. So the requirements to be met, they are 7 requirements. However, to score gender marker 1, which would be the minimum requirement, is to fulfill the requirement from number 1 to number 3. And number 1 is gender analysis. Number 2 is analysis informed design of the FS, so feasibility study and demonstration. Number 3 is data and indicators are disaggregated by gender, sex. Number 4 is gender-specific indicators, baselines, and targets to track outcomes and impacts. And number 5 is M&E framework reports on gender equality empowerment of women. Number 6 is at least one activity on gender equality empowerment of women. Number 7 is principal objective of the demonstration is set as gender equality and empowerment of women. And of course, if you fulfill the requirements from 4 to 7, you would score a higher score than number 1, so either 2A or 2B. Now let's look at the first 3. What is gender analysis? Gender analysis is simply put an exercise to see and assess what is the kind of gender imbalance, gender discrimination that is existing in the country of operation. So we can look at gender gaps in terms of labor force participation, skills, career progression in a specific industrial sector. We could also look at how, in some cases, throughout the supply chain, women tend to be more represented at the lower end of the supply chain, whereas in management and higher technical positions, there are more men being represented. And also, as part of the gender analysis, you may also analyze existing policies and practices within the country to see if there's any kind of discriminatory or policies that has incorporate some level of unconscious bias. And this gender analysis is particularly important because that is where you start off when it comes to project design. You would inform your project design based on this gender analysis. And that is the point number 2 on analysis informed design. And what is it that you can do? So for example, if you do analysis and you find out that certain tasks that is involved in your business is that it requires a lot of physical strength, and which deters women from taking over the job despite the fact that they might be interested. Then what you could do is to provide or introduce new technologies in order to circumvent that hindrance and to enable more women to perform such tasks. And next is next idea could be training more women into positions and job roles that were initially or traditionally dominated by men, and also introduce different kind of flexible, fair compensation packages, work packages, in order to ensure that the woman that you might newly employ through this project to stay within the project, and that you're able to retain them. And then next, in order to measure, well, to what extent your actions and targets are being met, you of course need some sort of data and indicators. And that is why we want point number 3 on data indicators that are disaggregated by gender or sex. So example could be the percentage of women among training participants, percentage of women in management roles, percentage of women in technical STEM roles, and so forth. And what I would like to highlight here again is that if you go through the guideline of the UNIDO, there's a lot of different other ideas and examples that you can go through. There is a very good overall description of what this gender marker is. And there's also a lot more publications of UNIDO, which highlights about gender mainstreaming ideas in different sectors, such as energy and climate change project or environmental projects, agribusiness, trade, and so forth. So it's worth looking into these publications and guidelines. So let's move on to the next slide. So these are the examples on gender equality and women's empowerment for the GS project, and it's also very much there's also some sort of similarities with what these other Japanese companies are doing in Japan as well. So when it comes to human resource management, you may consider recruiting women for underrepresented roles and positions. When you do advertisement for new positions and trainings, you may use gender-sensitive language and imageries, and also set defined target for proportion of female employees in management leadership positions, and also ensure that training or employment opportunities are provided in locations that are easily accessible with safe transportation opportunities. When it comes to capacity building, you may consider training female employees for STEM and technical roles, or offer not only hard skill training, but also soft skills training on leadership, communication, negotiation, also offer career counseling, and also that trainings are conducted during appropriate hours, meaning that both women and men can join without any challenges if these trainees have obligations to drop off their children to daycare in the morning and have to leave work early and so forth. And when it comes to policies, you may also design and implement policies on childcare support, elderly care support, in order to make and also to make them accessible for both female and male employees. And also you may identify existing national policies that may limit a woman from undertaking certain occupations and accessing working conditions, and also try to see how your project could go beyond it. And what I really would like you to remember is that all these actions, these are just examples, and the success of them really depends on your gender analysis and how it is fitting to the context and conditions of the country that you choose to operate. So as I mentioned again, gender analysis is very much a crucial focal exercise for you to further develop gender mainstreaming activities. So that will be the end of today's presentation. So this will be followed by a Q&A session. So let's please move the slide. And if you would like to access any kind of resources, they are showcased in the last slide. But let's move on to the Q&A. And thank you very much for listening and for your participation.
Well, thank you very much, Asa-san, for your very comprehensive presentation on gender mainstreaming initiative in the UN system, UNIDO in Japan, referring concrete examples of gender mainstreaming activities of the private sector in Japan. Well, next up is a question and answer session, as you already pointed out. So if you have any questions, please enter the question using the webinar's Q&A feature in English. Please be sure to include the affiliation and your name with your question. We will not read out either your affiliation or name in response to question, but we will not answer anonymous questions. So let me see the question and answer feature. Okay, Asa-san, we have one question here. The question is, what is the difference between participation and engagement? Well, actually, you touched upon about this in your slide 8, but maybe it would be great if you could elaborate more, and also maybe if you could explain some definition of the participation and engagement. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Kimi-san, and thank you for your question. So what I mean by participation is more about labor participation. So the extent to which women are part of the labor force within your organization. So is it, if we talk about recruitment, do we fill new posts with 50% women, 50% men, or is there more female and male candidates in the pool? And also talking about retention. So do we want to see that women leave the organization after you're getting married or after childbirth? But actually what the organization wants to do is that, given that you have already invested a lot of training and resources for each individual employee, you would like to retain them. So this is what I meant by recruitment and retention is the main focus of participation, in order to ensure that women, regardless of their positions, are participating in the workforce of your organization. When it comes to engagement, we talk about more about men and women both engaging, not only in the actual work, but also the private responsibilities, and let that be childcare or elderly care or any other kind of responsibilities. And what we see is that the Japanese government, or in general in different parts of the world, we see that there is a very strong push, for example, for men to take paternity leave. And this is basically what I meant by engagement, that men also engage in private responsibilities, so that this inherently will lead that woman to very much come back to work and participate in the labor force, and also to stay in the company and go forth with the work. So these are the two meanings or definitions behind it, and also that has different implications on the kind of human resource management strategies that you may employ for this project. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Asa-san. I think that your answer was very comprehensive and well noted. Thank you. So actually, we have only one question here in the question and answer feature, but any other questions will be very much welcomed. Well, I cannot see any more question, but maybe let me ask one question, Asa-san. Well, because you have already gave a lot of tips how to maybe develop the proposal from the proposal, including the gender mainstream perspectives. But do you have any other specific advice or suggestions for the applicants to develop the proposals for submitting to the GS program?
Sure. Thank you for your question. I think what's very important to realize is that any kind of projects, there is a link to gender mainstreaming to a certain extent. So your project might talk about introducing a certain new technology in a certain country. And if you think about just the technology, you might think it's hard to link it to gender equality. What does our technology have to do with gender equality? I think our project has very little connection, very little contribution. But does that make our project gender marker 0? Well, that's not the case, really, because, for example, if you introduce a new technology, what does that mean? You would have to train people to use that technology to make that operational. So when it comes to training, then do you only give opportunities for male candidates? But that's where the gender mainstreaming steps in. So you can talk about, well, as part of your training, you would want to ensure that there's 50% woman and 50% male, both engaged, take part in training. You could also say that not only this, you provide training on this actual technology, but you could also go beyond that and say, well, I would want that not only to train people who can use this new technology, but I would also like to foster that these people who were trained to also train other people. Then it comes to the idea of training of trainers. And do we only want, let's say, only female trainers or male trainers? We would like to see both female and male trainers on board. And that then comes to the idea of, well, then let's talk about communication, negotiation, and leadership skills. So that is where these kind of soft skills training become very important and also relevant. So I just want you to always be aware that there's always room to incorporate gender part of your project. And if you really feel a bit stuck about how you can address these, I think it's really, again, worth going through UNIDO publications and also especially this guideline, because it gives you a wide range of examples on what you can do. And that can be said about as I said, the energy and climate change project, environmental projects, agribusiness and trade and manufacturing, and it would give you a good hint. And also there are also publications about gender mainstreaming in different regions of the world. So if you decide to do gender a project in the Middle East or Africa, there is some resources available, and not only by UNIDO, but there's also plenty of resources online that might help you guide through. So that would be my additional tip for the applicants.
Thank you very much, Azusan. I think they are great tips. And yeah, I think your main message is that all the project proposal can be linked up with the gender mainstreaming. Thank you very much. So now we have one more question in the Q&A feature. So that is, what is the relevance between gender marker score and technical evaluation criteria? 5% of the score can be attained by scoring gender marker. Well, I think that question could be answered by the project manager of this DS program, Ms. Fumio Adachi. Over to you, Fumio-san.
Hi, thank you very much for the question. Actually, submitting gender marker score is a prerequisite to be selected as a to be selected as a demonstration, UNIDO demonstration. So we don't score whether, we don't score gender marker score itself. We don't care it is the marker is 1 or 5 or not. But once your proposal is selected, actually, I and my team will select a few proposals from all the selected proposals, which I and my team think to get good practice, good lessons learned from your demonstration. And in 3 years, we will compile all good practices from all the selected demonstration project and promote your good result related to gender mainstreaming at our promotional events. So you know that today companies which are very positive about the gender mainstreaming, their stock tends to be high, or they can earn good reputations. So we will make the best effort to promote your good activities related to gender mainstreaming in our demonstration project. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fumio-san. I think that answer was very clear and well noted by the who asked the question. Thank you. Okay, so now I think it's a time to wrap up our session. Sessions. Again, thank you very much, Azusa-san, for your great presentation and tips for all the applicants who are interested in applying for this GS program. And also Fumio-san, thank you very much for your answer from the viewpoint of the project manager. And of course, those who asked questions and participated in this webinar. So this is the end of the webinar. Thank you again for your interest in UNIDO GS program and gender mainstreaming initiatives. We are looking forward to quality proposals, including gender mainstreaming activities. So I wish you a nice day and evening. Goodbye.